We can go ahead and get going. Councilmember Coombs can jump in when she gets here. But yeah, so I'll go ahead and call us to order. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. My name is Juan Marcano, and I represent Ward 4 on the Aurora City Council, and I have the honor and pleasure of chairing TAPS. And I'll hand it off to you, Councilmember Murillo, for an introduction.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councilmember Kristen Murillo and a member of the committee.
All right, thank you. So moving on, our first item is the approval of the October 27 minutes. Do you have any changes?
I don't.
All right, neither do I. All right, same. All right, I see nothing under consent, so let's move right into general business. So we'll go to 4A, and I believe, sorry, my eScribe is running a little slow today. There we go. I believe we have Carly up for this one. So Carly, you've got the floor.
Yes, thank you, Chair Marcano and Councilmember Murillo. Let me get my presentation up and working. Let's see. All right. I will share the screen. Okay, hopefully that worked. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. All right, thank you, everybody. My name is Carly Campuzano. I'm the traffic manager within the Public Works Department. The first two items are mine on the agenda today. So the first item is an intergovernmental agreement between the City of Aurora and CDOT, the Colorado Department of Transportation, for a grant project for advanced signal controllers. So we received funding for these advanced controllers through the Denver Regional Council of Governments program. There's a specific technology set aside that has an application process that's due every 3 years. So we applied for a few different grants in July 2020. And of the 3 projects we applied for, we were awarded 2 of them. So one project we were awarded was a traffic signal system upgrade project. So that IGA has already gone through TAPS and council, and that project's underway. And then this project was the other one that we applied for out of that pot of funding. So this one is for the advanced traffic signal controllers. The money is good for this fiscal year now, which is the 2023. And with the CDOT, and that started in mid-year, so we're in fiscal year 2023 now. And so the IGA is for almost $800,000 in federal funds. And one great part of this type of application, this type of grant, is that there's no local match required. So that's all federal funding, and there's no city match on this. And so this is going to be a pretty short presentation, but just wanted to go over really quickly what the advanced traffic signal controllers are. So the $800,000 will cover about 175 of these traffic signal controllers. And this is really the computer that controls each intersection. And so a lot of our controllers are reaching end of life, or they're built to a standard that doesn't support current technology projects. So these new types that we're using can really support all different types of things for optimizing signal timing, supporting different types of signal timing in the future, collecting data, working with some other projects we've talked about, like transit signal priority and things like that. So these controllers are the latest and greatest standard, and they support a lot of different high-powered functionality. And so this grant will cover not all of our signals, but almost half of the signals at the city, which is great. So the question for the committee is, do you support moving forward with the resolution and IGA between CDOT and the City of Aurora for the Advanced Traffic Controller Project to the next study session?
All right, thank you, Carly, for that quick presentation. I do want to recognize Councilmember Coombs has also joined us. Councilmember Coombs or Murillo, do y'all have any questions or comments?
I do not.
No questions, but I'm excited to hear these updates.
Yeah, and I'm very excited that we're getting this new technology. I am curious, do we have an idea of where we want to deploy this, since it doesn't cover the full city? Is there already like a plan in place?
Yeah, that's a great question. Through the Denver Regional Council of Governments, they fund corridors that are more regionally significant. So that's a lot of our major arterials. So we, in our application process, looked at a map of the city and asked for every eligible location. And so these are going to be on pretty much all of our major arterials, but then all of the intersections with the minor arterials along the way. So it does cover most of the cities, but at our smaller, maybe, areas that the corridor is not identified by DRCOG as regional significance, then it's not eligible for the grant money, if that makes sense.
Yeah, is that something that we could have like a map just to demonstrate to council, like when this comes to study session?
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll include a map next
Yeah,
time.
that'd be really helpful. Awesome.
Yep.
But aside from that, I don't have any other questions. So I'm supportive of this. Council members Murillo and Coombs.
Yes.
Wonderful. So we'll go ahead and move that forward. And Carly, you've got the next one as well, right?
Awesome. Yep, the next one's mine too. So now I just have to figure out how to pull up my other PowerPoint. Hopefully not too painful. Okay, here we go. I think you can still see my screen, right?
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. So thank you again. I'm Carly Campuzano, Traffic Manager in the Public Works Department. And this next item is a grant update for the DRCOG tip cycle. So this is another project application that's in addition to the ones we've talked about before, which is for the 2022 to 2027 Transportation Improvement Program, or tip cycle, through DRCOG. And this application is separate and has come up recently because it's a project where we would be partnering with Adams County. So this is a graphic that I think you've seen before in some of our previous presentations that Victor and Mac helped with, but this gives an overview of the TIP program. So there's 4 different essentially calls for applications. Calls 1 and 2 have already been submitted and awarded, and we've been awarded different projects based on those. Right now we're working on a lot of different efforts for call 4, which it was opened this week, and the applications are due late January. So we're talking about call 4 projects right now. And the city's call 4 projects were already presented, but this one is a partnership opportunity where we'd be partnering with Adams County. So we have been working with Adams County and other adjacent partner agencies for a while now to look at doing a county-wide or area-wide safety action plan and safety study, just because we're seeing a lot of similar crash patterns and trends regionally. So instead of duplicating efforts, thought it would be good to kind of group up and look at this all together in a larger area. So the county has been working on a grant application that would include all of the different agencies in the county if they want to participate, and we're one of those agencies. As part of this grant opportunity for TIP projects, a 20% local match is required, and we would contribute towards that, and I'll give more information on the next slide with that. But this type of plan would be very thorough. It would be citywide, even though only part of our city is within Adams County. It would include the entire city, because it doesn't make sense to, section it off based on area, since we're in a few different counties. And so it would include a very robust safety analysis with a lot of data collection and reviewing the whole city for different crash patterns and ways to address those. It would have engagement and collaboration with different stakeholders, which could be public agency stakeholders, businesses, and residents. It would include a review and possibly updating standards based on findings and based on crash patterns and data. And then a big part of it would be, defining safety projects and really developing a good comprehensive list of safety projects that we could identify funding for either locally, or we could use to identify funding with different grant opportunities that are coming up. So some more information on what this specific grant application and grant project would include. So Adams County would be the lead applicant, which I think would be a huge benefit to us because they do a lot of the grant administration parts of this, which can be a pretty heavy lift. The City of Aurora would be a project partner along with other local agencies. I believe they've sent out communication to every city within the county to see who would want to participate, and maybe some agencies already have done something on their own. So the entire City of Aurora would be included in the project. The total project cost is estimated to be $2 million. So the city would contribute towards the 20% local match. And we've worked with Adams County to look at what our proportion should be. And we've looked at defining it maybe by lane miles or traffic signals or population, and it all kind of came out to the same number. So just with the City of Aurora's size compared to a lot of the other agencies, our local match would be $150,000, and that would be contributing towards the entire local match of about $400,000. And so a big deliverable from this action plan is a prioritized list of projects based on traffic safety and the data, and then this could be used to roll into implementation and pursuing other grants, because we know that other safety grants are on the horizon each year. There's a few different safety grants that come up every year, and this would be a great way to make us more competitive for those opportunities. So the question for the committee is, does the committee support staff partnering with Adams County on a countywide comprehensive safety action plan grant application?
All right. Thank you again, Carly, for the presentation. Council members Coombs and Murillo, do you all have any questions or comments?
Yes, I do have a couple questions. First is, in terms of the other partners, like the other city partners, if some of the other cities decided to sign on that maybe have not yet, would that potentially increase the scope and cost? And then would that result in kind of an increased match from them specifically? Like they would be responsible if that increases the cost?
Yeah, so I think the county sent out communication to all the different agencies a couple weeks ago, so they're probably still solidifying who wants to join in and maybe who doesn't, either already has done this or maybe doesn't have the funds to contribute or something like that. So I think that 150 would probably be our match regardless of who else partners, because if some of the other larger agencies within Adams County decide not to participate, that probably decreases the overall scope. And so I think everything would just scale down and our match would probably be similar. But there are definitely efficiencies gained with having more agencies contribute, definitely better economies of scale. But I don't think that our match would increase beyond the 150,000. I think that's a pretty solid number.
And then I guess the other question is more around the types of projects. Like I think, we have pedestrian safety issues, like vehicle pedestrian safety issues and vehicle bike safety issues, in addition to our vehicle safety issues. And those are also included in types of crash patterns. So would this help us to kind of potentially prioritize bike ped improvements for areas that have, a significant number of those types of crashes?
Yes, I think it definitely will. Just looking at our crash data, pedestrians definitely account for a significant proportion of our fatal crashes in the city, which I think you guys all know. So whenever we're talking about safety projects, we always have a specific focus on the injury and fatal crashes. And so generally we do look at pedestrian, bicycle, scooter, motorcycle crashes in a lot of depth. And I think what this type of project and study allows us to do is really dive into what is happening in those crashes, what the pattern is. Like for pedestrian crashes, is there a pattern at night? Is lighting the issue, or is it the lack of crossings? What's exactly going on? Because just saying there's a pedestrian crash pattern on a road doesn't really tell the full story. And I think this will really help us dive into the details and see what's needed based on different areas in the city. And I think we also would probably divide up the city when we're looking at this, just because the characteristics of the networks are so different in different parts of the city. But yes, I do anticipate that the multimodal aspect will be a huge part of this.
Could I add something?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
I would say also this will partner very nicely with our multimodal transportation study that we'll be kicking off as well. So I think it'll all kind of come together and help us address a lot of those issues. So.
Great. All right, Councilmember Coombs, any other follow-ups or questions?
Nope, I'm good.
All right, Councilmember Murillo.
No questions.
All right. So thank you again for the presentation. So kind of following along the same line of as Councilmember Coombs' questions, I want to know how this is going to tie into the upcoming multimodal study, and also, the kickoff of the Build Up Aurora program is tomorrow, where we're actually going to be finally, retreating and resurfacing and repairing, and in some cases rebuilding our residential streets. And I want us to make sure that we are maximizing the impact we can have with that program. And I love the direction that, this is going to take us in. But I want to make sure that we are improving safety, especially in our residential streets. As you mentioned, pedestrian fatalities are one of the biggest issues that we have, not just in Aurora, nationwide, when it comes to motor vehicle incidents. So one of the things I would like to see us do is rework the surface use. And I've been following along with the, 20 is plenty, kind of initiative to reduce residential, speed limits to that. And also not just reduce the speed limits, because y'all know the signs are really just a suggestion ultimately. And folks will drive the speed that they're comfortable with driving. But if we can actually re-engineer our streets and that, the surface use there for those lower limits in partnership with the Build Up Aurora, or rather utilizing the Build Up Aurora funds. And then, with the great information that I'm sure we're going to get with this comprehensive plan and study and the other study, is that something that y'all already taken into consideration? Because my concern is that we start reworking, repairing our residential roads, but we're not redesigning them at the same time. Does that make sense? I know I rambled a little bit there, but.
Yeah, and Councilmember Marcano, the Build Up Aurora current as it's planned and with the 35 million in COP is going to be to repave the streets. There is not funding included for redesigning. We will certainly take a look at where those crash patterns are, as you mentioned. I'm going to venture to say, and Carly can correct me if I'm wrong, many of the pedestrian fatalities that we see are actually on our higher speed roadways, like the collectors and arterials. I know with the police doing their new neighborhood photo enhancement, I think that will help inform a lot. But as far as redesigning residential streets, that is not included in anything, any scopes right now. We can chat about that as more findings come out, I'm going to say, through the multimodal transportation study, which we're just working on the scope for that now, but definitely hearing what you're saying. And based on your questions, I believe yesterday, even about the 20 mile per hour, we'll be bringing a presentation early next year so that we can chat about that, those opportunities and philosophies as well.
That's great. And I just want to add that I'm not saying let's, add in new curbs and things of that nature with the money that we approved. Obviously, that would be a lot more expensive than what we budgeted for with the COPs. But if we're going to be resurfacing, that would include striping, right? So I think that there's still opportunity to put some of these soft improvements in, like, dedicated bike lanes and things of that nature, and narrowing the drive lanes in our residential roads. Because I'm looking, as we speak, right out onto Harvard out my window here. And I have seen folks flying through this residential road. My guess would be 40 plus miles an hour, taking a turn as they, come off of Elkhart. Does it happen every day? I can't tell you, that for sure. But I know that all it takes is one person driving recklessly to hit a kid, or to hit someone crossing the road, or to hit someone's pet, and we're going to have an issue. So what I'd like to see us do in our residential roads is narrow those drive lanes. Keep the off-street parking, because I think that does have somewhat of a calming effect. Because what we need to do ultimately is make it feel unsafe for motorists to speed. And we have the radar sign right there for signed currently for 25 miles an hour. But folks, I see that thing flashing all the time. They're going much faster than that. So I'd like to see what we can do to start to change the built environment. Again, not adding physical obstructions, because we don't have the budget for that with the COPs, but just change the striping, narrow those lanes, do what we can to improve bicycle and pedestrian safety, including in our residential streets. I'm sure the data doesn't show that, these incidents happen all the time in our residential streets. I would hope that that's not the case. I hope that we never get to that point. But I think that it serves us to be proactive, as opposed to waiting for patterns to emerge to then respond to that. So that's just, my piece there. Y'all already know where I'm at, but I just want to put that on the record for the meeting. So, all right. That said, Are we okay with moving forward 4B? All right, I am as well. So
Yes.
thank you all for the presentation.
You.
All right. Moving on, 4C, our 2022 and 2023 snow and ice control plan. Hang on a sec here. Is eScribe running slow for everybody else today too? Okay, it finally popped up. And I think we have Lynn on deck for this one.
Afternoon, I'm going to try share. Let's see what happens.
All right.
We got a picture of snow plows up.
Not seeing
yet.
Nope. Oh, there we
And
go.
another button. There we are.
All right, you got it.
All right, and I apologize again. It seems like I'm always having camera issues. I can't find a position that you don't see the glare from my glasses. Rather than have you stare into reflections of computer screens, I thought I would keep my camera off today. So my name is Lynn Center. I'm the Deputy Director of Public Works in charge of operations. And I'm here today to talk to you pretty much all things snow, because I think I have the next two items on the agenda and they're both related to snow. First, we're going to be talking about the 2021-2022 snow season summary. We're going to look at forecasts for 2022-2023 and the minor changes that we're making to our snow and ice control plan for 2022-2023 snow season. This presentation is going to look familiar, so you're going to see some slides you've seen before. The first one being our mission, which is to provide the best possible level of service for the public within our budgetary constraints. First, I'm going to give you a rough idea of where last year's snow totals fell within our historic snow totals. We actually have snow totals, annual snow totals back to January of 1951. Pretty amazing. And as you can see, way over here on the right is our snow total for the snow season of 2021. We accumulated a total of 42.4 inches of snow, which is, a little low than we normally see, but it's right in there. Our 70-year average is 63 and a half or so inches. This is that same information, but it's broken out by month, and we only went back 10 years because of the amount of data that's being shown here. Again, the 2021 snow season is way over on the right. And overall, we had a little bit less snow than we've had in previous years. You might see a peak there, a couple of peaks. One was in February. That's the tallest one we have. And then the next one that really stands out, and will stand out on the next slide, is in May. Let me go to that slide. So this is a graph of our historical snowstorms in the light teal versus the 21 snow season, and that's in purple. And as you will see, a couple of months stand out, February and May, as being above what our historic average is. In February, we actually ended up with just almost 14 inches of snow over 6 storms. So that was definitely our busiest month for last snow season. One of those storms dropped about 5.5 inches, and the other one dropped at almost 5 inches. And then our May surprise, that dropped just a little bit over 6 inches in May, if you all remember that. 2-day snowstorm dropped about 6 inches of snow. So looking at our snow history and last year by snow category, we see that we were a little bit above historic average for category 1 storms, 1 storm below average for category 2 storms. And then we didn't have any storms that we classified as a category 3 or category 4. And what we can also see from this slide is that the majority of our storms are category 1 and category 2 snowstorms. And this is just that same data in a graphical format for people who like to look at pictures rather than reading tables. This is a cost comparison. Every year we present you a cost comparison from the previous snow season. So costs for the 2021 snow season as compared to the 2020 snow season were a little bit less. Couple of factors is even though we spent a little bit more money, our estimated population increased quite a bit. So our last year's cost per resident for providing snow removal was $5.85. Pretty inexpensive. So now let's talk a little bit about the 2022-2023 snow and ice control plan. We didn't make very many changes from the prior years, but I'm going to go over our basics again. We'll talk a little bit about the season forecast for 2022. We'll talk a little bit about the plan changes, some challenges that we might experience, and then the strategies we have to address those challenges. So our snow plan basics haven't changed. We have 4 route priorities, priority 1 through 4. They are displayed on our maps in colors ranging from red to yellow. The red routes are primarily our arterial roadways, so think Chambers Road, Alameda, Mississippi. Our blue routes are primarily collector routes that are adjacent to schools and hospitals. And then the green routes are neighborhood connector streets. So if your neighborhood has 2 ways to get in and out, the road that connects those 2 ways would be a green route. And then our yellow routes are our north, south, and east-west connectors way out in the east areas of the city. And then we have 4 storm categories that are roughly based on the accumulation of snow for each category. Our category 1 storms are less than 2 inches. Category 2 are range from 2 to 6 inches. Category 3 storms are 6 inches to 12 inches. And category 4 storms are more than 12 inches. I'm also showing the number of storms we've had of each category since 1994, and then what that averages out as the number of storms per season. And again, we see that the majority of our snowstorms are category 1 or category 2 or less than 6 inches. So a little bit about staffing. This is our preferred or ideal staffing that's presented in our snow plan. This level of staffing allows us to plow all of our prioritized routes, and it's shown per shift. I would just say we've never really been staffed at this level. So our priority through snow removal is to keep our priority 1 and priority 2 routes open and passable. When we get into the higher category storms, our main goal is to keep them open for emergency vehicles rather than passenger vehicles. So snow might accumulate a little bit more when we get into the category 4 storms on the roadway. No 2 storms are alike. Each one's different, and we staff based on what the storm characteristics are, as well as the category. And then I would also say we were really lucky in 2020. Public Works Department went through a reaccreditation with the American Public Works Association, and our snow and ice control plan was awarded a model practice by APWA. So we're really proud of that. And we've really satisfied with how our snow and ice control plan has morphed and developed over the years. So these are the types of maps that we generally provide. One is our citywide snow map, which is on the right-hand side. It shows all of our prioritized routes and the route areas. And then the one on the left shows the detail for each snow route. And these maps are what are included in our snow and ice control plan. Our objective throughout the plan is to really keep the roads open and passable for public safety and to allow orderly movement of traffic during our snow events. And I'm sorry, I've lost my place in my notes.
It's all good.
Okay, changes for 2022 and 2023. Not a lot. We've added a total of about 5 lane miles. We've added a little bit in North 8, right around Piccadilly and 40th, and South 3, right around Murphy Creek, and then South 7 down there around the Inspiration. We did not add any priority 1 routes. These were all priority 2 or priority 3 routes. And that's a total of about just under 5 lane miles. The other significant change we made to our snow plan this year was to include our enhanced or separated bike lanes. So
That's exciting.
well, we thought we probably better address how we were going to deal with these when it snowed, so that everybody could understand the priority of the bike lanes and what to expect when it snows and if they are planning on using them. So
Good.
the bike lanes really impact these routes. North 1 is impacted by the enhanced bike lanes on Montview Boulevard from Peoria Street to Chester Street. And then south areas, and I'm sorry, you see my taskbar down there? I apologize. I must have gotten
Yeah, we see your Windows taskbar at the bottom, if that's what you're asking.
excuse me, let me close that so it will go away. There we go.
There you go.
Sorry about that. But the other routes in the south that are impacted are South 1, 2, and 3, and they're impacted by that Jewel, Florida, Mexico lane. Keeping these lanes clear of snow requires different and specialized equipment. So because of that, we've prioritized them after all of our other routes, including our priority 3 routes, are cleared of snow. During a snowstorm, if necessary, these lanes will be used to store snow from roadways during the winter snow events, particularly on Mexico Avenue between Chambers and Buckley, because they've got enhanced bike lanes on both sides of the street, and we would have no place else to put the snow. So we have now a total of 1,505 lane miles in our prioritized snow network. And that is still a 2-lane blacktop that is 752 miles long from a municipal center to Columbia, Missouri. I was looking for a different city, but Columbia is the closest that matches. So we're going to stick with Columbia for a little bit. So we get all of this work done by working with our partner departments. So Public Works Pros and Aurora Water provide, all of us provide staff and equipment for our winter road maintenance. And we do have contracts in place for additional heavy equipment and operators for our larger snow events that would exceed our capacity. I'm going to try to go through these fairly quickly. So the next couple of slides are about our materials and equipment. We use 2 types of material on the street. One is a solid material. It's called ice slicer. That's stored in tents, and you see a couple pictures of those over there. This is a de-icing material. It's used primarily to break up snowpack or break up ice. We also apply a liquid anti-icing, usually before the storms. This is called Apex. We store it in tanks. Usually we'll try to apply it before the snowstorm, sorry. And what that does is it really lowers the temperature at which the liquid that's already on the roadway freezes. So that buys us a little time before ice starts to build up on the roads. It also prevents the ice and snow from bonding to the roadway surface, so that when traffic hits it, or we go over it with a plow, we're actually able to get down to bare pavement during our cleanup operations. So it's very helpful. And kind of new last year and expanded this year, we have some vehicles equipped that can actually put both materials down at the same time. So we will put down the ice slicer that's been pre-wetted with the Apex. And what this does is it really reactivates the melting capabilities of the ice slicer, but it also helps the slice stick onto the road and onto that top layer of accumulation that's on the road to keep it broken up and so that it doesn't turn into ice. So this is some of our typical and not so typical equipment. Usually you're going to see a tandem axle truck with a plow blade on front of it, and that truck could be dispensing either the apex, if you see it pre-storm, it could be dispensing the ice slicer during the storm, or you can even see one that has we call it a V-box, and those are the ones that dispense both the ice slicer and the apex. But in our heavier storms, we'll bring out the big guns, the heavy equipment, and that's our graders and our loaders. And for our loaders, we actually have snowblower attachments to them, so that, as you can see, when we get in those deep storms, we can utilize these to actually take the snow off the street and try to clear up some of the snow that's accumulated on the street. We try to do this, even though the picture shows a house, we try to really only deploy these out in the eastern parts of the city so that we aren't, burying somebody's house in a mound of snow. But we have the capability. So planning for our snow events all starts with our forecast. And we use many different sources, including our local weather station. We also look at NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. From NOAA, we can look at satellite imagery. We can actually watch the storms as they form in the Pacific and watch how they strengthen or weaken as they move inland and they move closer to Colorado. We also get all of our watch and warning data from NOAA. We have 2 contracted services that we pay for. One is Skyview Weather. They give us that pinpoint forecasting just for Aurora. And then we have DTN, which is an online service. They provide for us hourly forecasts through the storm. And that is based on actual data that's collected from road weather information systems. The DTN also provides recommendations for treatment strategies for every hour through the storm. So now we look at how we look at forecasting a storm. Let's take a look into our crystal ball and see what's coming this year. So Farmer's Almanac, which a lot of people reference, is showing is showing it going to be pretty cold. Their motto for this year is shake, shiver, and shovel. And they're predicting lower than normal temperatures and more than normal precipitation for the northern parts. So they're calling us the hibernation zone this year. It's very popular, and sometimes that's amazingly accurate, but I prefer to look at data because, I'm highly analytical, so I like data. So we also look at NOAA for the seasonal predictions. And NOAA this year is predicting colder than normal temperatures in the north, but they're also predicting a very rare 3rd year La Nina pattern, which is going to result in persistent drought on our western states. So for October through December, NOAA is predicting trending above normal temperatures and below normal precipitation. So temperatures on the left, precip's on the right. And from January through March, so the second half of our season, they're saying equal chances. So to me, that means closer to normal temperatures and normal snowfall, January through March. So challenges that we might be facing this year. For us, it's all about the people. Street operations is experiencing a 37% vacancy rate. That's 24 positions. For us, that means we only have 45 employees for the entire city. The good news is that only 2 of them are brand new. All the others have been with us through at least one snow season, and many of them for many more seasons than that. Aurora Water is also reporting a 20% vacancy rate, and Pros is there also at that 15 to 20% vacancy rate. So what this means is that for our ideal staffing, Aurora Water, Public Works, and Pros all together can't meet our ideal staffing level for a Category 3 event, which is everything over 6 inches. So we as a team came together to strategize ways that we could respond if we got really challenged with one of those Category 3 snowstorms. So what Streets has done is we've increased the number of seasonal worker positions that we have open, and those are open right now. We're recruiting for those. So if you know or hear of anybody that has a CDL that wants to come work snow shifts and learn how to drive a snowplow, send them our way. We'll be absolutely glad to have them. Streets is going to be calling in Pros and Aurora Water drivers for some of our lower category events, even some of the heavier Category 1 events, just depending on what kind of staff we have available for us. We're also looking at using our non-CDL employees for operations to free up CDL drivers. And so that can look like having non-CDL drivers stay in our yard to help load material onto trucks. It could also be using some of our non-CDL operators to loan them out to Pros or to run their snow removal efforts on some of their trails. That would free up their CDL drivers to help us out with the streets. We'll be looking at bringing contracted drivers and equipment in, starting with our Category 3 events. In the past, we've wanted to delay that until we got to those 12-inch snowstorms, but we're going to be looking at doing that even for maybe the 7 to 8-inch snowstorms, just depending on the characteristics of the storm. And then lastly, for our operating departments, Pros is responsible for snow removal at the fire stations. They are looking at, or they have actually issued a contract for snow removal for the fire stations, and that operation is going to be managed by Aurora Fire, so that they will have control over what stations need to get plowed and how often they get plowed. So that will free up not only a driver but a supervisor as well to put towards the streets. We also got some help from the Office of Emergency Management, Aurora Police Department, and Aurora Fire Rescue. As you may recall, after the unexpected snowstorm in May, OEM launched a after action report that came out with some recommendations to improve our response to those storm events. Out of that, APD has been able to establish rescue task forces. That was one of the recommendations. And they have equipment that would allow them to respond to stranded motorists. And they are working with Aurora Fire to add some paramedic or first aid capabilities to those rescue teams, so that when they go out, the stranded motorists, they can provide some sort of medical care if needed. The equipment they procured to do that are track vehicles, and they can even help with those vehicles, help Aurora Fire get in for medical calls on some of the medical calls they get. This is going to be a great help for us if we get into that situation, because in the past they've relied on streets operations to plow them in and plow them out. So this will help them be a little bit more self-sufficient in some of these events, and we'll be able to have our plow drivers really concentrate on keeping the roadways open. OEM has also developed a dashboard to create situational awareness in these larger storms that will help us to deploy the closest appropriate resources when they're needed, and it will also help them track the calls. One of the things that they found with the last snowstorm in May is that calls would come in, but they wouldn't get closed, and they had a hard time really understanding what calls were open and what were closed. So this will really help them and help the EOC as we move through there. The last strategy that we looked at, and is one that will only be implemented The last one that will be to be implemented is going to be a modification of our service levels. The snow and ice plan has always allowed us to modify our service levels based on the severity of the storm and the resources that are available to us. The difference this year is that we might need to modify our service levels at a lower category storm, potentially even as low as 6 inches, all just depending on the storm and the employees that we have available. So under this strategy, we would concentrate on plowing the priority 1 routes, which are in red, and the higher priority 2 routes, which are blue. And those priority 2 routes are servicing fire stations, police districts, and hospitals. And they're shown on these maps in that purple, fuchsia, pink highlight color. We would also be looking to call in contracted drivers and large equipment for our category 3 events that will help us to keep city resources in the core city and have our contracted drivers out on some of the streets that are farther out east. So just to talk a little bit more about staffing, and you can see how we came up with the Cat 3 snowstorm as kind of our threshold to start looking at implementing that modified service level strategy. We've gone through and looked at the drivers that we needed to keep our reds and blue routes, so the priority 1 and priority 2 routes open during the snowstorm. And those are shown in that middle column there, drivers needed per shift. Then I've listed all of the drivers that are available for public works. And as you can see, when we start hitting into that category 2 light, which is about that 3 to 4 inches, we start needing to have some help from our partner departments. And we'll be calling in Pros and Aurora Water. In fact, we've already done that with the last few snowstorms that we've had. But you also see that when we reach the category 3, 51 drivers per shift is about all that we have right now in the city to drive snowplows for us. So that is kind of why we start looking at our category 3 storms for modifying service levels. We can staff all the way through a category 3 storm if it's not too bad, but we would be looking at bringing in contractors probably around those 8 or 10 inch snowstorms. It does require utilizing all of Pros and Aurora Water and contract driver equipment. This really does align with our current snow plan guidelines, and so we didn't feel any policy change was necessary to our snow plan to be able to implement this modified service level plan if we need it. So much depends on the characteristics of the storm coming in. And as an example, the storm that hit us in May was technically a category 3 storm in that it was 6.1 inches. However, given that it hit in springtime and we had very warm temperatures before and very warm temperatures after, we were able to respond to that snowstorm as a category 2 snowstorm. So we classified it as category 2, even though it was a 6-inch snowstorm. So little summary here, because that was a lot of information to throw at you. Public Works Pros and Aurora Water are experiencing unprecedented vacancies that are going to result in streets utilizing non-public work resources for lower category snow events. Snow routes are going to be plowed in priority order as they have been in the past. So we'll go as far down into our priorities as we can, but routes are going to be dropped in reverse priority order so that we can allocate plows to those priority 1, those high priority routes. Historically, most of our storms are less than 6 inches. And right now we don't anticipate modifying our usual plowing strategy, which is priority 1 and priority 2 routes on all those storms that are less than 6 inches. Again, depending on the nature of the storm. For storms larger than 6 inches, we're going to be calling in contracted drivers and large equipment as we need to, as the storm dictates to us. And depending on the storm characteristics, we may need to drop those priority 2 routes, again, which would be primarily servicing adjacent to schools, which probably would be closed anyway. But as the storm allows, we would add, those would be the first routes that we would add back in. So the next steps with our plan is to circulate the plan to OEM, the school districts, and our other stakeholders for their awareness. And then we actually have scheduled Monday with OEM a meeting to go over their winter storm plan, and they've planned a tabletop exercise so that we can identify how the 2 plans interact with each other. With that, I am available for any questions that you might have.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Lynn, for that presentation. It's very, very robust and detailed. So I want to first recognize my colleagues, see if they have any questions or comments for you. So members Coombs or Murillo?
Yeah, so I have a couple. The first is in relation to the bike lanes. I'm glad that we have a plan and that we're laying out that plan. My concern is around the kind of storing of the snow in the lanes. I understand the need in a heavier snowfall situation, but are there any options for looking at kind of more longer term plans that would involve something other than that, where those lanes could be accessible to folks in the event of heavy snows? I know that perhaps folks don't think people would be riding their bikes for transportation purposes in a heavier snowstorm, but as a former bike-dependent bike commuter, I will say that in my experience, I absolutely did have to do so. So I'd like to see some ways to address that, or kind of find out what the other opportunities we may have are to address that.
Well, we do have the equipment. What we lack are the people. Even fully staffed during a snowstorm, our priorities are the streets. But we could certainly do an analysis to figure out what additional staff we would need to add those bike lanes to our clearing efforts during a snowstorm. And clearing them, the snow isn't likely to be there for days and days. They would be removed as part of our cleanup efforts. So as for Mexico is the one that has me concerned the most with the bike lanes on both sides of the street. But as we were going through clearing up and clearing out the curb and gutter there, we would also be going in and removing all the snow from the bike lanes as well. So it would happen at the same time. We're not talking about leaving it there to melt entirely. It would be part of our cleanup effort with loaders and big heavy trucks to haul the snow away.
Okay, excellent. That's very helpful. Thank you. And then my other question is just, obviously we don't currently have the staffing or probably the equipment from prior discussions to really look at any type of clearing of residential routes in major snowstorms. But that is a conversation that has been ongoing after there were some really severe issues associated with residential routes in that May snowstorm, as well as I think the February one. Both kind of raised some concerns from neighbors about the clearing of residential routes. What is the status of looking at contractors for that type of a program of just kind of a one pass clearing the snow in residential areas?
So my next presentation will talk a little bit about residential snow plowing. We'll talk a little bit about the challenges that we have. When we do have those big snow events, we do get to digging out, if you will, the residential streets. They're just not our high priority, and we will get to them when the arterial network and the reds and blues are safely passable. And we have in the past only one time in 26 years that we've had to call in contractors to help us dig out the residential streets, and that was in 2006, 2007. We got like 3 feet of snow in 2 days. So we definitely called in contractors, one to help us keep the streets open that we were supposed to keep open, but also in the cleanup area to get the roads, the residential streets cleared as much as we can. The challenge we have there is the size of equipment that we can get into those streets, but also it's a different plowing operation because we have to actually remove the snow. We can't leave it there because then we're blocking driveways and cars that are parked on the street. So it's a little bit of a challenge for sure on those residential roadways. But I think my next presentation might shine a little bit of light on our strategy for residential snow removal and potentially some options for addressing that.
All right, thank you. That's all I have.
All right, Councilmember Murillo.
Thank you. And yeah, I did have some thoughts on the residential piece, but I do understand that the following presentation is kind of more focused on that. So I'll just hold any thoughts there. But I guess, and thank you, by the way, that was a lot. It's hard to hear that, like, a plan can be really thought out, we're, well managed in that way, and then we just don't have enough like people power to execute a plan, So that's frustrating to hear, and I would have, it sounds like y'all are aware of the issue. I thought I'd just offer these, like I know, for example, in other departments we contract with kind of organizations like Bridge House, for example, to fill in some labor in certain, where it makes sense. I don't know the requirements for being able to plow snow, but I guess it might be more relevant or less arduous or less requirements if it's plowing for the residential neighborhood. But it makes me think of organizations and groups like the Street Day Labor Center, for example, right? I would imagine that they don't find work during the snowy months and days specifically. That's people aren't out and about looking for kind of people to do kind of odd-end jobs, and I wonder if that might be. So I guess it's more of like a thought and a comment. If I hear your frustration and I share it, and just trying to offer suggestions on how we might overcome that moving forward. But otherwise, no additional questions. And thank you for your presentation.
Well, and that's an excellent comment. And I would just add that in street operations, we don't have a lot of opportunity to utilize forces that don't have their CDL. However, PROS uses quite a few of employees from Ready to Work to do some of the snow removal operations that they're responsible for. And they have looked at utilizing more of those type of people, particularly when it will free up CDL drivers to give streets those to keep our streets open. I will say Aurora Water and PROS have been really awesome this year. I don't know how else to say it, but awesome partners this year and developing strategies, but also both of them have committed to providing the same amount of support to us this year that they have had in years past, even though they are seeing their those vacancy rates that we saw. So we're all as a team really comfortable that for the majority of our storms, nobody's going to see any difference driving out on the street. It's going to be the same that we've had every single year. It's always when we get into those 6, 7, 8-inch storms, we all start getting a little nervous, even if we're fully staffed, because we just don't know what's going to happen. So we feel pretty confident that we'll be able to handle the majority of our snowstorms that we have. We did talk to a company about providing snowplow operators for us to drive our trucks. It was a very interesting conversation. If you're interested, I'd be glad to talk to you about it offline. The bottom line, he was going to offer it to his employees and we would hire them potentially as seasonal workers.
Okay.
to work for us. So we're open to any and all suggestions that come through, but we have explored a few already.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
Yes.
And any further questions or comments, Councilor Murillo?
No, not on my end.
All right, thank you. So I do have a couple of questions, and I'll start with one that was very much in line with what Councilor Murillo brought up. So I want to know a little more about the snow removal and the bike lanes. What is the equipment that we're utilizing there? I'm going to guess it's not a full-size truck. It's going to be something like a 4x4, like a
We can't even get a pickup truck in there.
Yeah.
So what we end up using is something about if you know what a skip loader is or a skid steer, a really small bobcat.
Okay.
That would have a plow or a broom on the front of it, something like that. It could even be in those heavy snowstorms, good old person with a shovel,
All right.
to dig them out. We've only had a very few storms this because 2021 was really the first full snow season we had with those bike lanes. And so we're still trying to experiment to see what works the best. But the equipment we have, we acquired some equipment specifically sized to go in there. And we're also able to utilize some equipment that we already have that's small and nimble enough to get in there.
Okay.
It's a work in progress. We've talked to some other agencies that have the separated bike lanes as well to see what they're doing, and they're kind of in the same state that we are, so we're experimenting to find the perfect piece of equipment to go in there.
Okay, great. Because I did want to, bring up the potential of using Bridge House / Ready to Work to keep those open in a timely fashion. Or to get those open rather in a timely fashion during snow events as well. Just as Councilmember Coombs mentioned, there are a lot of folks who actually do, depend on bike lanes and specifically our protected infrastructure for commuting, even during snow events. Now, I do understand that we have a challenge, when it comes to using heavy equipment or city-owned vehicles with, folks who are potentially, going to be contracted. I guess that's not something that we are comfortable with the liability issues around. But if we're in situations where it can be done manually or with light equipment, so yeah, I see that a skiff loader or a skip loader is,
Yeah.
It's small, but it's still heavy equipment. So
Yeah.
that's not something that we necessarily want, I guess to enter into liability issues with around having contractors drive those, and they require training, and I'm assuming a CDL, would I be correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
CDL.
Yeah. So, so I get the challenges there, but yeah, anything we can do, to both, benefit our residents to keep that open, but also to provide folks who are ready and looking for work with opportunities to do so. I think that would be a win-win for us. On the same topic of, openings, do you have any social media graphics created for those temp driver opportunities that you mentioned earlier? That we might be able to share as council?
I do not know. I'll have to look at the postings. It's all on, the NeoGov website. And we can certainly work with our communication staff. I think Julie's on the call to develop something that we could put out on the social media.
Yeah, just in general, for this and
Yeah.
anything else, if y'all are able to share that with all of council, I think all of my colleagues would be happy to help, spread the word and let folks know that there's opportunities to work for the city. So, and then I did want to talk about the South 2 portion of the snow and ice plan here. So I get a lot of complaints, concerns from folks who live in Chatsford and Woodrum about the, I think it is Dillon, that stretch. It's a green priority 3 route that connects from a priority 1, which is Sable, and then connects down to the priority 2, which is Marina and Heather Gardens in that loop. And they feel that they're not highly prioritized enough given the level of usage that route gets during snow events. And some of them do get very upset when they see that Heather Gardens and Away and Marina Way, or Marina Drive rather, have been, freshly plowed and are frequently plowed, while that stretch kind of languishes behind. And this has been an ongoing issue, but I just feel compelled to bring it back up. And I'm just wondering, how is it that we are justifying the prioritization of these routes? Because the way I see it, looking at the map here, if they actually do have a higher level of utilization there, that should then be a blue route, specifically since it connects from a red route to a blue route. But that area is deprioritized as a connection there. So can we talk a little bit about why that is? What's the rationale is to make that a priority 3 as opposed to priority 2?
Be perfectly candid with you, for that particular route, the prioritization was set many years ago, and I wasn't involved in that, so I don't know why we had planned this year to do a really deep dive into our snow plan. Unfortunately, I lost a key person who would be leading that effort, and we weren't able to do that, but I'll make a note and we will certainly look at it. I will say that all of our south drive, in fact, we have one driver that's his route. It's south 2, that's his route. That's what he gets to do, and he loves doing it. And he is very well aware to do that area north of Heather Gardens first. And I actually do have a vehicle tracking that shows we hit that area first. I will say, I think Heather Gardens and Marina Drive get a little bit more traffic than people realize. That could be part of it. Also, they do have their own metro district, and for all we know, we haven't seen them, but for all we know, they're out there doing stuff as well. But we do prioritize in blues. We do try to hit that one area before we hit Heather Gardens. Even in street sweeping and everything else, we try to hit that area first. We definitely don't want to show that there's any special consideration being given to Heather Gardens, but they do get a little bit more traffic, I think, than people realize.
Yeah, and I'm well aware that that area is actually pretty busy. Hence why all the traffic calming improvements were put down there. I know there's an office park down there. I don't think a lot of people recognize that. So there's a lot of traffic that goes in there, and it's honestly it's an exit off of a highway, Parker Road. It dumps you off onto Vaughn and onto Heather Gardens Way and Marina. So well aware of all of that. But so I think that's why I think really the route, the green route, should probably be blue, because I do believe a lot of folks follow that same loop and then cut through Chatsford, Woodrum to get up to Iliff, and to connect to Sable as well. So, and I do appreciate that y'all do a pass through there first. This is something I heard from Tom as well when he was still with us, and I just want to make sure that I just keep bringing my constituents' concerns up to y'all. I understand you have tracking, but I hear from these folks every time we have a snow event. And yes, Heather Gardens, their Metro District does maintain the private road. I have spoken with folks on their district board and gotten a copy of their policies. They only ever use their private contractor to hit our public roads during major events. And that was something that I guess y'all were not aware of in the past. That they even did that, because I guess it's technically not allowed, but they did it anyway.
They do it.
Yeah, but so I do know that happens as well, but it's that appearance, right, of impropriety. And then I'll just be very candid. My constituents believe that they were shown favoritism because Heather Gardens is a very active community. They turn out to vote. So, and I'm not making any accusations of my current colleagues. This all predates all of our time on council, but just some more context there. So if when you're doing that evaluation, if we can really take a look at that connector there on Cimarron, I do think that should be a higher priority route just based off of how it's used. And with the existing blue route here that we have coming down, I think it's Black Hawk, and then it turns down to where it becomes Abilene, and it goes through the traffic circle there. So I live right at that turn, and I see Aurora Fire Rescue and Falk utilizing South Blackhawk as opposed to turning and going onto the traffic circle and then utilizing Abilene all the time, because my window actually faces right out into that intersection. So I'm wondering, this is the route that we prioritize, but in reality, it seems like our EMS is utilizing the more direct route, which is basically following Blackhawk South down to Yale. So as you're evaluating the routes, that's maybe another suggestion I would have with that portion of our routes here, because it seems to me, and maybe we can look at GPS data from our vehicle, from our fire vehicles to see if that's actually true. But it seems to me that they're utilizing that more direct route as opposed to going around. So just wanted to make you aware of that as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We will, again, with our deep dive next year, fingers crossed, we'll take another look at that route as well. I know when that traffic circle went in, nobody was really sure how traffic was going to flow through that area. So we just kind of kept with what was already there. So it's a good time for us to go back through and double check it for sure.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for the presentation. That's all I've got. And yeah, just if we could get maybe social media graphics to share to make folks aware of these openings, or at the very least, if you could just share the direct link for the application portal with all of council. Like I said, I'm sure most of us would be happy to share that out. So
awesome. That's great. Thank you.
All right. Yes, ma'am. So thank you so much for that. And then we'll move into miscellaneous. So that'll be then 5A. And I believe you've got the floor for this one too, right?
Yes.
All righty.
So again, I'll reintroduce myself, Lynn Center, Deputy Director of Public Works in charge of operations. This presentation is going to be about residential snow plowing and the pilot program that we tried out with the High Plains Metro District, which covers the Blackstone neighborhood. I'm going to be sharing some of what we saw in operations, and then also some suggestions or recommendations moving forward. Okay. We just went through snow and ice control plan notes, so this, I wasn't sure where we were going to fall in the, on the agenda. So this slide is probably fairly unnecessary, but I just, as a reminder, our residential streets are not prioritized for snow plowing. We will go in and remove snow as a cleanup effort in those big snowstorms, but generally in the middle of a storm, our residential streets aren't prioritized for snow plowing. Some of the challenges we have plowing residential streets is that, as I've mentioned before, that our typical plow operations create a windrow that could block driveways and particularly in heavy snowstorms, actually bury parked cars that are parked on the street. In order to eliminate that, we would need to get in with some heavy equipment, loaders, and haul trucks to actually haul the snow off-site. The plowed residential streets could allow access to our roadway network that might not necessarily be prepared for the additional traffic, which is why we've got them prioritized below our reds, our priority 1 and our priority 2 routes. So we make sure that that network is ready to have the additional traffic from the residential neighborhoods in it. And then we also have a high potential for damage to private property. We looked at, and I did a really detailed presentation to this committee about this time last year or the year before. We looked at 3 options for providing plowing for residential streets. We did look at contracted plowing and city plowing. And I don't have those slides in this deck, but if you'd like, I can come back with that at your next meeting and we can go into more detail about that. What we ended up doing was developing a pilot program for metro districts or HOAs to provide snow plowing for residential streets that are public streets within their district boundaries. Our pilot program did this by executing an IGA with the metro district. And that's, I say current, even though it ended at the end of June. It is the High Plains Metro District that covers the Blackstone neighborhood. And for this pilot program, the costs to the city were actually pretty small. So this is a list of some of the requirements that were required of the Metro District, including like they had to develop a snow removal plan and send it to us. Use of very specific materials, equipment, snow event logs, pre and post season assessments, and then a post season report that included the details of each time that they deployed. For this pilot program, it was the High Plains Metro District for the Blackstone neighborhood. What I am showing right here is a map of that. It totaled 18 lane miles. We did the initial pre-season inspection in September of 2020, and we actually hired a contractor to do that. It took them about a week to get through the entire district, and they looked for pre-existing damage to curb, gutter, sidewalk, and the roadway. That total subsequent inspections were actually conducted by city staff, and why will be apparent real shortly. The total we spent for inspections pre and post for both seasons was about $2,380. The IJ was executed in January of 2021 and expired in June of 2022. Through these, it ended up being a season and a half. The Metro District did not deploy forces once during this season and a half, and the seasons covered, if you recall, that blizzard we had in March of 2020, and then the surprise May snowfall just this year, and they didn't deploy for either of those events. So just kind of a little bit of weather history. We went over this a little bit with my previous presentation, but storms in excess of 12 inches of snow are really rare. The majority of our storms are category 2 or less, so that's 6 inches or less. Most of the storms occur in our spring and fall seasons, so we end up with rapid temperature recovery that really melts the snow to a passable level that would allow common passenger vehicles to pass within 48 hours. So for 99.5% of our storms, the snow melts to a passable level before city resources can be deployed to plow residential streets. But this is where there could be an opportunity for metro districts and HOAs to fill that gap if necessary. So conclusions from our program: the number of events potentially needing private plowing is low, probably less than 1 per year, which really makes us question the value of providing that service. Metro districts and HOAs can increase their fees to cover this cost, but might not actually render the service. So I'm not sure how that would be accepted by the people in the districts and the HOAs. We did learn probably the most important thing we learned is that IGA is not the most efficient method for a citywide program. The lead times for an IGA are really long. So we have to have applications submitted in May in order to be able to do the pre-season inspections in September. And with current staff levels, because it takes a lot of staff time to negotiate and get those agreements executed, we can really only support 1 or 2 IGAs per season. We looked at a permit program when initially we were proposing this as a potential solution, but that would require developing some ordinances, processes, and fees. If we wanted to move forward in that direction, we could work on getting those developed in 2023. So we would be looking at our first permits being issued in 2024 and 2025. Our inspection costs are approximately $76 per lane mile, which of course we're not budgeted for. And then because we anticipate more interest if we were to move forward with a program, we would need at least 1 additional staff person with ongoing costs of about 86 grand and one-time costs of 50,000 to include a vehicle, computer, and a workstation. The other thing is at the couple meetings prior to this, we did hear some concerns around equity, and are the HOA and the district, the Metro District areas receiving more or more services than other areas of the city. We have received interest from 2 Metro districts and an HOA, but we anticipate if we were to do a citywide program that there would be more interest. So with that, with our current existing resources, we can't really recommend moving forward with a citywide program like for this season or probably even the 2023 snow season. But we can certainly consider a different type of a program moving forward, and looking at some of those deeper into some of those other options we looked at before. So with that, we really would be interested in any questions or feedback that you might have for us.
Right. Thank you so much for that presentation, Lynn. So I'll go ahead and recognize my colleagues first. So Council Members Coombs and Murillo, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I do not. I'll go ahead and pass.
No questions here, but I think just hearing the challenges and the staffing that we kind of have, it's like a reoccurring theme, and kind of the challenges there. Like I understand the recommendation. So yeah, although I'm sure the Ward 1 constituents would love residential snow plowing. I think I hear it every year, multiple times a year. From different people that would be, and I'd love to get to a place where that's feasible and viable. But yeah, I guess I hear the concerns for the recommendation at this time.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I'm very much in the same boat. I would love us to have a full service snow removal program. I think several council members have expressed that in the past. I understand the budgetary and staffing challenges that we're experiencing right now. I am curious though, did you all reach out to this HOA and ask them why they never deployed services, even though we did have 2 major snow events?
I'm going to have to double check the notes on to why, but my guess would be that it warmed up fairly quickly, and also that they likely did not. They had a contractor ready to go, but maybe they couldn't get in until after the snow had all, pretty much started to melt. Those are pretty much what we have seen when we are trying to look at contracting this type of work. It's hard to get them in the middle of a snowstorm.
I hear that. Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry, Councilmember Marcano. I just wanted to add something, if that would be okay. We don't want residents on the street until we've had time to clear those arterials and collectors. So, we really are focusing on that safety aspect. And if you get a lot of residents out there, it actually creates more of a hazard. So I would throw that out as well. We just stay safe, drive carefully, but if you don't have to get out, don't. To let us do our job. And then to Lynn's point, Mother Nature is our biggest supporter when it's fall and spring. So we really like to use her for that.
Yeah. No, I hear that. All right. Well, yeah, I think we'll follow staff recommendation on, well, at least I will. So I support following staff recommendation. I believe my colleagues do as well. Yes. All right. So thank you for the update on this and for the work of putting together this pilot. Maybe someday.
Maybe someday.
Yeah.
We'll keep our fingers crossed.
All right. Appreciate y'all. Okay. With that, anticipated topics for next meeting. I can't recall if we discussed whether we were going to have a December meeting or not. So
I think this was planned to be the last one because of the holidays.
All right. Well, okay, so we might have a different chair next year. Although I have loved chairing TAPS for the 3 years that I've been on council so far. This is one of my favorite committees. It's just some wholesome nerd stuff, but very, very seriously, y'all. And I just love and respect the work that y'all do for us. So thank you so much for all of that. And yeah, it's such an important city function. And, not just snow removal, but all the topics that we cover on this committee. So I just want to thank you all. And I wanted to thank my colleagues also for serving on this committee with me this year.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you very much for chairing. And we love the interest, right?
Yeah.
Because we love nerding out too.
Yes. So, yeah, council members Coombs or Murillo, do y'all have any comments since this will be our last meeting for the year?
Just, I have definitely learned a lot. And it's also nice to be able to kind of see the work that I'm doing at Dr. Cog back over on this end and kind of how the process works on the city side to make that happen. And I really agree about the nerding out and all appreciating all of the work that you all do and the really thoughtful, detailed process you go through to get things done. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you guys kind of said all the good stuff, so I won't belabor that point, but thank you all for your time and your energy. It's been a pleasure working with you all this year, and thank you for just working with all of our crazy questions and asks and diving into XYZ topic. I know that takes a lot of time for you to really be thorough, and I certainly appreciate it on my end, working with the team and you all. So thanks again for a good year and some good work.
And have a wonderful holiday if we don't see you all before then. So with that, we are adjourned for the year. Thanks, everybody.
Bye all.
Bye.